recording.
Why not?
Oh. I'm Sean Hansen. You're watching Sean Hansen's Comedy Corner. This is the 221st episode of my Comedy Corner. I'm here with no other than Scott McNeil.
Hi, thanks
How
for
you
having
doing?
me on. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Good. Today is special because we have Scott McNeil on, and we are live on YouTube right now. SHCCtv. I can be my own cameraman right there. I just fixed it, and now they can see you.
They can see me too?
Yeah. So this will be going live on YouTube tonight.
Wonderful.
And everybody can see us 24 hours a day.
Whew, I'm going to be tired.
Yeah, I know. So how's everything been?
Things have been going great.
That's good.
And especially, with the comedy, I seem to be picking up more momentum, and I keep getting invited to do more things, like being on this show.
And signing my first Viewer's Choice Award thing.
That's official.
I could show it to the public here, but they won't see it.
Careful, everyone will want one.
Yeah, so vote for me by May 1st, and maybe I can win.
Absolutely, I see that happening.
We'll split the award. Half of the year will be at my house, half the year will be at your house.
Fair enough. 50-50.
So tell me a little bit about your comedy career. When did you start?
Well, it's kind of, I've been fortunate that it's evolved over the years. As a kid, I always have had my sense of humor, and around 4th grade, I was introduced to Mad Magazine, which I love. I still have my collection. I have 5 cases of Mad Magazine.
Oh, yeah? Wow.
And then back in 1993, I was working at an oil heating company. I was managing a parts room, and I used to kid around with the dispatcher. And he grew up with Jimmy Tingle.
Oh, wow.
And he knew Lenny Clark and Stephen Wright and all that years ago in the early 80s. And he said, "You're pretty funny, too." He said, "These jokes that you come up with," he said, "you remember them?" And I said, "Well, not all of them." He said, "Well, then you better start writing them down." And I was like, well, I don't know why. I've never really been built on self-esteem, so it was kind of awkward, but then it just picked up momentum with writing them, and at the different jobs I had after that, I just kept, not only there, but I would keep scrap paper with me and write them down. And I had been aiming to do a book of my jokes. I even have had a title for years. I still haven't done the book, but I want to call it A Fragment of My Imagination.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Fragment of My Imagination by Scott McNeil.
Right.
The Scott McNeil. I would say the.
The.
Yeah.
One and only. Right?
How many E's would be after that? We don't know.
Depends on whether it's American or English, I guess.
Fragment of My Imagination. So have you started putting thoughts together of this yet?
Well, actually, some years ago, I had a job that ended, and my mom had passed away, and some other sad events, and I had some time on my hands, and I'm like, I had a paper bag full of jokes, and I really didn't know how to use a computer, so I went to a library and started putting it on floppy disk. And the more I typed in the jokes, I realized there were different categories of like relationships or codependency, death, and then I started to make different categories, and then I don't know if you're familiar with Loretta LaRoche.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of her.
I
haven't
her.
met her, though.
I went to see some of her performances, and she's published different books and things. So I was interested in copyright and publishing. So I went to like 2 or 3 of her things, and afterwards I tried to talk with her, but there were other fans and people around, and it was very nice, but I just couldn't follow through with her. So I got to connect with someone through her office.
I'll be the cameraman, too.
Okay,
That zooms in.
in case I forget what I look like.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So you went to our office?
Yeah. Well, I didn't want. I called and I emailed, and they connected me with a copyright lawyer, and I copywrote my first 16 years worth of material.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep writing, and I seem to be picking up a faster pace with it. Now I have close to like 190 pages of material,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm one of my favorite comedians is Stephen Wright, who, as we were talking about,
You met him before,
I met him,
yeah.
and he went to
This high school.
this high school that
Yeah.
we're at. So I've seen him a few times, and I've had the pleasure of talking with him for a little bit.
Now, where did you meet him? At a show?
At a show.
Yeah.
The first time I met him was up in Portsmouth, some sort of music hall
Mm-hmm.
theater, and they weren't letting people backstage unless you were on a particular list.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of hung around, and the people who ran the place were like point blank, if you're not on the list, you can't meet Stephen Wright.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay. And then after they had exhausted the list, they announced, they said, well, if you wait a moment, Stephen will be out.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to have my picture taken with him and talked a little bit, and it's pretty cordial, a nice guy. But it was kind of indirectly through my interest in his comedy that I got my first break to do stand-up.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't always follow comedy. It's kind of odd that I like it so much, but I don't always follow
Yeah.
who's who and what's what. And I remember it was December 15th, 2008.
Mm-hmm.
He was getting an award out in Foxborough, Mass.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the big-name comics were going to be there. Of course, Stephen Wright to get his award, Jimmy Tingle, Lenny Clark,
Mm-hmm.
Steve Sweeney, Don Gavin, and Tony V
Mm-hmm.
was the host, the MC for the night. And I just went for the entertainment of it, to enjoy being there. And I realized as soon, it was at that Patriots Place, is that the name of it?
Yep, Patriots Place.
And as soon as the show ended, most everybody left. And I'm like, there are all these comedians around. And I'm like, well, I'd like to say hello to Stephen. And,
Yeah.
and Tony V did a great job of emceeing. And it was pretty casual, and I got to say hello to pretty much everybody that performed and all that. And Tony V was standing over in front of the stage, and I had never met him before. I had no idea what a great guy he is. Very nice person, very humble. And I went over to compliment him on what a nice job he had done. And we chatted for a while, and I was just purely meant to ask him a question. I said, what is it like to do stand-up? And I told him I'd like to do a book. And he started to explain what it was like to perform, and then he kind of interrupted himself, and he said, there's no way I could fully explain it to you. He said, I tell you what, he said, call my friend down at Giggles in Saugus and tell him Tony said you're going on.
Mm-hmm.
I was like,
Really?
me? I'm like, and it was just such a nice opportunity. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to say no. But I was a nervous wreck.
Was that your first time?
Yes.
Yeah. And when was that?
It was January 21st, 2009. It was
Wow.
a Wednesday night.
Mm-hmm. And tell me about that night at Giggles.
Oh, it was, everyone treated me well. I was going to say it was awful, but it was only awful inside my own head. It was just, I don't know, it felt like I was going to the executioner's chair or something like that. And it's also, they have a thing, they call it a bringer.
Yeah.
You have to have a certain number of people show up, pay to get in and claim they're there to see you in order to be able to perform.
Is this mostly everywhere, would you say?
I would say it's at some of the more well-known clubs.
Mm-hmm.
And
So how many people did you have to bring?
4.
Yeah.
And I had about, I don't know, probably 20 people who guaranteed they were going to be there.
Mm-hmm. And how many showed?
3.
3?
And I was biting my nails, and I'm like, they told me, they're like, you're going to need someone else. I'm like, what
Did
am I
you say,
gonna...
well, I brought myself, so that's 4?
Run back and forth between
Yeah.
the stage and the audience.
Yeah.
But,
And clap and go
well,
do your
just
job.
before one person's kind of an obscure friend walked in, and he was wearing almost like a cowboy hat. Like
Yeah.
I've never been so thankful to see him.
Mm-hmm.
And then like, there we go, we got 4. And what I did was, I didn't know what people would do to remember their set.
Mm-hmm.
So I made up these big, like, they're almost like a cardboard type of thing. It's almost like that erasable type of
Yeah.
But what I did was I cut them in half,
Yep.
and I wrote just brief summaries of what the jokes were
Mm-hmm.
and what order.
Yeah.
And I had a friend sit up front. They
And
were my
hold
cue, and they were kind of like, what is this? And someone thought it was part of my shtick, like.
Oh yeah.
So they were starting to point it out, and they're like, everyone, Scott McNeil's using cue cards. And I was, oh my God, how humiliating. But people were very supportive and polite, and I was kind of waiting for someone to just say, you're a nice guy. The jokes are pretty good, but time for you to hang it up.
But you're still doing it today.
Well, not only that, but one of the people from Giggles sent me an email the next day, and they said, you already write on a professional level,
Yeah.
and I know people who would just like to buy your material.
Oh, really?
And I was like, really? So I was kind of shocked by that. And last fall, I've met a lot of nice comics. People have been very friendly, connected on Facebook and all that now. But one person said to me, they're like, well, where did you start doing comedy? And I said, oh, at Giggles.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, Giggles? And they said, well, who do you know? And I said, well, I know Tony V, and I know Mike Clarklove. I met Lenny, and I know Johnny Peasy, and they said, really? And they said, how long you been doing stand-up? And I said, 2.5 years. And they said, oh, you got to be kidding me. I've been doing it 6 years.
And they haven't
still
met
waiting
them
to
yet.
get into Giggles. And,
yeah, because that's a tough place to get into.
That's what people say, yeah. So I've been kind of blessed. And then Johnny Peasy has his club that used to be called Chuckles. It's in the China Blossom up in North Andover.
946 Osgood Street?
Something like that, right?
Yeah, I covered a lot of shows there back when I first started, yeah.
Yeah, nice guy.
Yeah, he is nice. Yeah.
So I've been...
Have you performed there at all?
Yeah, actually quite a bit last summer.
Yeah.
Jack Walsh, who you've had on the show, has been a friend too, very supportive of me. And he said, you should apply to be in the Boston Comedy Festival. And I was kind of borderline, like, what's a Boston Comedy Festival? So pretty ignorant about it. And I was like, oh, okay. So had to create a new YouTube video because it has to be submitted online. It's like the modern thing. You can't just go in person or send a letter. It has to be online. So I'm not technically savvy, so someone helped me with it. It was a pain in the butt, but we got it done. And then people were saying, well, they're pretty particular about who they have on there. They probably get 300 or 400 applicants, and they picked 96. So I was like, well, and then I don't know. They took a while for them to get back to me, but I got an email that said, congratulations, you've been accepted to compete. And I'm like, I was going back through, I think I have all my performances documented, where and when I was and all that. And I did an approximate count. I think when I was in the Boston Comedy Festival, it was like the 10th time I performed, which is, it's quite a blessing.
Pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, to do that. But the hard part for me, too, is I've taken a comedy class by Tony V. And it was interesting, all the different nuances and things that go into it that most people wouldn't be aware of. And I think the biggest challenge for myself is that I understand there are two different types of comedy styles. One is comedy club style, where the comic might have like a few basic stories, and within each story there'll be different funny moments.
Yeah.
Like I needed to go on a job interview today, but I went to have breakfast and I was all out of milk, and then I couldn't find my car keys. So it's all kind of a one story, and much easier to remember. And I'm told that my style is what they call TV style, which is almost like, I don't know, Henny Youngman or something with the one-liners.
Oh, okay, that's good.
And I'll kind of cluster them together and I'll put them in an order, but there's really no story. And someone got after me a while ago. They said, you got to work through some of these things, because in one joke you're talking about your girlfriend, another joke you're talking about your wife, and another one you're talking about being single. You got to make up your mind here.
Which one are you?
Yes. So I'm like, well, it really doesn't matter. And I was up at Johnny Peasy's Lots of Laughs last fall, and I did one of my typical opening jokes. And the joke is basically, they introduced me, here's Scott McNeil, and and then everybody claps and that sort of thing. And then I say, well, thank you. I'm always very excited and nervous every time I do stand up. And on top of this, I'm also very excited and nervous because, well, I'm about to become a father for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And they clap again. And then I say, of course, I'm excited about the baby, but I'm extra nervous because I haven't told my wife yet. And then they laugh. Well, after this show, this lady came up to me, and she was very friendly and polite and all that. And she said, I really enjoyed the whole show, and you were very funny. And she said, I wanted to take a moment to say congratulations. And I said, thanks, but for what?
Mm-hmm.
She said, well, you know, the baby. I'm like, there's no baby.
That's just a joke.
Yeah. And she thought, she pointed to the stage, and she's like, but you said. And I said, yes, I said it on a stage as a comedian entertaining people.
Yep.
And she was like, well, what about your wife? And I'm like, I've never been married. And she was just, she just looked like devastated, like she didn't know.
She looked left down.
And I was thinking, good thing I wasn't telling her the end is, the world is ending tomorrow or something.
So she probably believes everything.
That's what I'm afraid of. It's like, gee, you know, I'm like a 55-year-old lady who believes everything she hears.
That's funny.
It is.
Now, getting into your comedy, you do the one-liners pretty much?
Pretty much, yeah.
So what are some of the one-liners you have, and what is the topic you focus on?
Well, it's not necessarily one topic. I actually have gone through my files and picked out different categories, and I try to have them be somewhat chronological. I might start with like childhood and growing up, dating, marriage, therapy. Trying to think of like the childhood ones even. I'll talk about, I'll go up to my parents and say that I think the doll you had just bought me is broken because when I pull this string, and they said, oh no, Scott, you misunderstand, this doll is much more advanced. On this doll, when you pull the string, it listens. Or seems like some of the more simple jokes are popular. I used to date a woman who collected magazines, but I had to break up with her. She had too many issues.
Wow, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, a couple other examples. One I've been kind of closing with, and I want to say too that when I write jokes and perform them, I really try to just plain be silly. I'm not trying to hurt anyone's feelings or put anyone down. So, and people seem to take it that way, that as just fun entertainment, which is how I mean it. But, one I've been closing with that people seem to like is I talk about. I was sitting on a bar stool and a woman came over to me and she put her arm around me and she seductively whispered in my ear. She said, "If we went to bed together, what's the first thing you'd want me to take off?" I said, 30 pounds. And then I was actually, I know a man who's asked me to give some input. He's a DJ and he's working on becoming more of a comic. And he wanted me to write for him. And I'm like, well, I don't really actually sit down and write. When things come to me, I capture them. But I never sit down and just say, okay, today I'm writing from 1 to 2 or whatever. But I happened to come up with some jokes for him. He said he had a background as a state trooper. And he was now retired. So I wrote some jokes for him. And I wrote one that's kind of newer, and I've been using it myself. I told him he could use it once or something, but it was going to be mine. And, it's a little bit of a longer one, but I've been using it as an opener lately, where I say I'm a retired police officer, and the first time I pulled someone over was for a driving infraction, and they didn't want to stop for me. Then they didn't want to show me their license, so I was pulling them out of the car, and they made a grab for my gun, and I ended up in a foot pursuit. And I tackled him to the ground, and I beat him with my nightstick. But that was the day that I decided I wanted to become a cop.
Because you
Yeah, like I was some sort of wacko who later decided to become a cop. Once in a while someone's like, I don't get that joke. And I'm like, okay, so.
You gotta listen to the story, and then you gotta get the catch at the
the
back of the
key
story.
thing at the
and flip it, and then put it into your brain or something.
Yes.
Yeah. And register it.
Yes, it takes some work, and that's one of the things that's difficult is if I'm at a place where people have been drinking heavily, they're not going to necessarily get them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because listening to that story, I was like, because I had never asked you about what you do for your day job, but I was thinking, was he a cop before? But then at the end, I was like, wait a minute, I get it. But what do you do for work?
Well, actually, I do several things.
Mm.
I have a multi-family house, and I'm also handy.
Yep.
Which is fortunate and unfortunate because it means I'm working on the darn place all the time.
Yep.
And I've fallen behind on it a little bit lately, but I'm also a huge Doors fan of the old rock group.
Yeah, your email address.
Yes, my email address. And I stumbled onto, back around 2006. I mean, when I say I'm a fan, the amount of money I've spent on my collection you could use as a down payment on a condo.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So I have all sorts of stuff. And
how many concerts have you been to from the Doors?
Just a handful, because Jim Morrison died in '71, which kind of, but I've gotten to meet the surviving guys, and I even met the guy who discovered them. And
where did you get to meet them?
In different places. Robbie Krieger, the guitarist, performed in Alston. I think that was in '95. I saw him there 2 or 3 times. Ray Manzarek was up in Lowell for a celebration of Jack Kerouac back in October of '91, and that's the first time I met him. He was doing an autograph signing out in Marlborough, Mass. I also met him when I was out in Hollywood Boulevard. But I have literally about 50 books on them, and I've read most of them. And someone told me that they played in Lowell once at the Commodore Ballroom. And it's been pretty hard digging up people for it, but I've been working on putting a thing together for a guy who wrote a book called The Doors on the Road. It chronicles all the concerts that they ever did. So I contacted him, and just so he'd have the information, and he told me he was planning to do a second edition of the book and going to put me in as a contributor.
Really? That's amazing. So that's Doors on the, that would be like Doors on the Road 2 or something? Or Doors on the Road again?
Again, yeah, just a second edition or something. But I'm actually thinking about doing like a mini book because I haven't heard from him much in a while. And
speaking of these books, Doors on the Road, and your book, A Fragment of Your Imagination, have you wrote before any of this?
Not really. I mean, in a way I've written because I've put it to paper and then typed it all up and been copywriting it, things like that.
And your jokes, so you wrote those. And, so that's cool. You got the comedy, you got the future books that are going to be bestsellers.
Thank you.
And no one's going to know who Stephen King is anymore. So it's all going to be about Scott McNeil.
Scott McNeil, that'll be it.
We have about 5 minutes left.
Well, time flies by.
Yeah, it does when you're having fun. But I have a segment called Out of the Blue Questions.
Oh, here we go.
You know that one, and because you were here for my 2-year show.
I was blessed to be here.
And that's where the questions are basically out of the blue, so they're out of that curtain over there.
Okay.
And they completely don't make any sense, and they're off the top of my head right now.
Do my answers have to make sense?
They don't need to make sense.
Okay.
You said you were a cop, but you're really not. But
so
you can either do truth, or you can hide it under the curtain, or whatever you will.
Okay. I'm game.
Yeah. I've never had anyone ask me that before. Do they have to be true? So now I'm not going to know if you're true or not. But out of the blue, question number 1: if you were to live anywhere in South America, where would it be?
Oh boy, I'm not as familiar with it. So.
Or Africa.
Or Africa. I think I'll go South America. It's a little closer to home. At least I can drive, I think. I'll go with Argentina.
Argentina? And why is that?
Well, since I don't know much about South America, I'm kind of, I don't know if you remember Guy Williams, used to be on Lost in Space and all that. He went there and he liked it. I think he actually passed away there. Seems like it'd be nice country. I'm not sure. Was that where Butch and Sundance went to? They went to South America
Yeah,
somewhere.
I think so.
Or was it Bolivia?
One of those two. And then it's right on the side. Yeah.
But you said I
West
could move there. You
Coast.
didn't say I had to stay there. So at
Yeah,
least
you
I
don't
get
have
the
to stay
freedom
there.
to move on.
You can come back, and since you can't drive, we'll support you with a duck boat. So you
Okay.
can
I like the duck boat,
finish
so that
driving
works
back.
out. Yeah.
And out of the blue, question number 2. Since you said you own property, what is the worst story you have with one of your tenants?
Oh my God, that's kind of an easier answer. I had a couple, and the husband, I never really saw him without a beer in his hand.
Yeah.
And they had kept getting away with more and more things. They had 2 German shepherds. They'd play with them inside. They kind of started to try to become my boss. And they had bought another home.
Yep.
And they were getting ready to move. And I had screened out a lot of tenants over the phone. And I called them up and I said, out of courtesy, I'd like to see what works for you. But the person can either look at it Friday evening, sometime Saturday, or sometime Sunday. And they said, we don't want you to show it at all. In fact, I'm cleaning up what they said. If we catch you or found out that you've shown it to someone, we're going to beat you up. So I had the police come out and explain to them. They even admitted to the police they threatened to beat me up. So it was, that made it simple, and I thanked them for that. So, it kind of fizzled out after that, and they moved along. But I kind of have a background in landlord-tenant laws and things like that. So I've dodged a lot of bullets that way. So.
That's good. And out of the blue, question number 3. Since you're such a big Doors fan, out of everybody that played in the band, who are you mostly like, and who would you be in that band?
Who would I be if I was in that band?
Yep.
Okay, well, besides Jim Morrison, the singer, Robbie Krieger, and he actually wrote most of their big hits like Light My Fire, and I was a very humble person, and I actually own a guitar like his, but I still haven't learned to play, even though I've owned the damn thing for like 19 years.
Oh, wow.
And you were asking what would I play in it. I actually, I've gotten some silly autographs from them. Ray Manzarek signed an autograph, said, Scott, you're Jim's twin. Robbie Krieger signed one for me that said, Scott, obey your restraining order. And John Densmore, the drummer, signed it. You know, when I asked them to sign it this way, of course, I like the silly autographs. He said, Scott, without you on kazoo, the Doors never would have made it. So I'll stick with kazoo, even though they never had a kazoo player.
And before we go, tell me a little bit about when you were out in California to see the Jay Leno show, and after that, tell me your upcoming schedule and how people can find out more information about you.
Okay, well, before I can forget that, I'm on Facebook, Scott McNeil, and it's MacNeil. I'm also on YouTube. If you type in Scott McNeil Comedy on YouTube, there's one good video, and the other one is me doing stand-up for my 3rd time. I went out 5 years ago to Hollywood, and I was there for a few days. I had a tour of the NBC studio, and I went in for a filming of the Jay Leno show, but I was in the audience. I wasn't on the show. And before the show, Jay was taking some questions, and he actually grew up in Andover, and he was at one of the Doors concerts that I was researching.
Oh, wow.
But he never said on TV which show he was at. So I asked him that question before the show, and he was about to go on to another question, and I said, wait a minute. I said, I have a favor to ask. And he was like, a favor?
Yeah.
And I said, I'd love to come up there and have my picture taken with you. And he said, you want me to stop everything and have 250 people wait for you while you come up to have your picture taken with me? And his security people had already tipped me off that he usually does this. So he said, yeah, so I have a Polaroid picture at home.
Of you and Jay Leno?
Yeah, it was March 1st, 2007.
Wow. You're
cool.
Great with dates too, wow.
Some of them, some stick out. Don't ask me the wrong question, I won't know the answer.
January 21st, 2009, he started his professional comedy career at Giggles, and he doesn't know his own birthday.
Actually, my birth date is this Friday, the 27th.
Oh, wow. Happy birthday.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you turning 29?
29 all over again, yes.
That's good. All right, well, thank you very much for coming on, and I look forward to having you on in the future.
Likewise, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Now get out. All right, perfect. See you later, YouTube world.
Thanks. See you at the clubs.
See you at the clubs.